Hey you guys, it's Michelle,
Leah,
and Brandy,
and this is Spooky Shit and Tales from the Beyond. So this week we are going to be talking about aliens. Table of contents, Brandy, go.
I'm going to talk about the Travis Walton UFO incident.
I'm going to be talking about the Hill abduction.
and I will be talking about the Lonnie Zamora incident.
All right. I don't know what any of those things mean, so Brandy.
All right, I guess I'll take it off.
There we go.
So the Travis Walton UFO incident was an alleged alien abduction of an American forestry worker, Travis Walton. I realized it sounded very hopeful. By a UFO on November 5th, 1975.
Okay.
So according to Travis, on November 5th, 1975, he was working with a timber stand improvement crew in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest near Snowflake, Arizona.
That's a cute name.
I was about to say, I like the name of it.
It's kind of random as fuck for Arizona, though. It's our town is Snowflake.
That's what I thought. While riding in the truck with 6 of his coworkers, they encountered a saucer-shaped object hovering over the ground approximately 110 feet away, making a high-pitched buzz.
Ooh.
Travis claims that after he left the truck and approached the object, a beam of light suddenly appeared from the craft and knocked him unconscious.
Wait, were the other ones still in the car? And they're like, Travis, go check it out.
I don't know how it went down.
They like rock, paper, scissors. Here we go.
He was
All
like,
right, Travis,
They just
you
pushed
lost.
him off.
yeah, either that or they're like, all right, you can just drop me off here. They just left him.
The other 6 men were frightened and supposedly drove away.
Damn.
They just
Those
left.
are not right or
fucked
die.
up.
It's definitely not. Poor Travis.
They're just coworkers. They don't really know him that well.
It's like, I don't know, I just work here.
Just work here. Bye, Travis.
Travis said that he awoke in a hospital-like room being observed by 3 short, bald creatures. He claimed that he fought with them until a human wearing a helmet led him to another room where he blacked out as 3 other humans put a clear plastic mask over his face.
Ooh.
Very
That's
specific.
Weird. Yeah,
It's weird that
it
they
is.
turned human. No, wait, they were like kind of creatures at first?
Yeah.
And then a human walked in.
I bet that it was like
No.
the same guys. They fucking transformed themselves to be like, all right, we'll look like humans.
So you gain our trust.
We'll make this
Maybe.
easier on
It's
you.
possible.
Some telepathy shit.
Travis says that he remembers nothing else until he found himself walking along a highway with a flying saucer departing above him.
Ooh.
It's weird. I don't know if this came up in your research, but the term ufology?
It did. I didn't write it in my notes, but I saw it and I was like, what a word.
I did.
I've never heard of it.
Ufology?
No, what is it?
That's an actual thing. It's the investigation of unidentified flying objects by people who believe that they may be of extraordinary origins, aka ufologists.
I
People-
read it as UFO legit. I don't know how I read it.
Ufology?
I don't know how I read it.
I mean, I don't know if I'm pronouncing
Ufology.
it right. Ufology.
I don't fucking know.
Ufology.
It all sounds dumb. Fake. I won't say dumb. Sorry, any ufologist out there.
Michelle doesn't want to believe.
You're
I want
skeptic.
to believe.
You're not a ufologist?
I guess not.
The Walton case received mainstream publicity and remains one of the best.
Wait. Publicity. Brittany, you can't just skim over that. I was like, please start it. You have to start again, Brittany. Publicity.
Publicity.
Me and Michelle looked at each other while you were reading. We're like,
I was like, you're really not going to start this sentence over.
I was hoping to just skip over it.
we could tell.
It's not, I don't know why that's imagining like a little fish was talking. It's like publicity.
How do you say?
Publicity. There's no L at the beginning.
Publicity.
Publicity.
Almost like publicity, but not.
Publicity.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm finna fuck it up again.
I like how you did the like ufology so confidently, and then publicity.
Yeah,
You're like,
hardest
yeah. How do I say this word?
For real.
The Walton case received mainstream publicity.
I'm keeping it. It's fine at this point. It was too good to not keep it.
Anyways, and remains one of the best known alien abduction stories, even though I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of it either.
So I've never heard of it, but I feel like I've seen, I'm not sure, but I've seen a bunch of reenactments of that exact scene of a guy like laying on a table in a white room, and then he sees like two little bald dudes. Is that from something specific, or?
It went on to inspire.
If you hold on, I'll get there.
He's always asking these fucking questions.
It wasn't a question. Was it?
It was
You
just a
ended it with a
statement.
question.
It was a statement.
I'm just trying to make small talk discussion.
Do you know how to pronounce this?
Inquirer.
Huh?
Inquirer.
Okay. The National Enquirer, which was a tabloid newspaper.
Oh, I know about the National Enquirer.
Oh, do you? I didn't.
They just like spout. They say ridiculous things. They spew ridiculous news.
They spout.
They spout them off. I don't fucking. Do you want to ask me that question again?
Nah, keep
Okay,
it in.
it's fine.
Anyways, they awarded Walton and his coworkers a $5,000 prize for best UFO case of the year.
Oh, what a weird award to give.
After they allegedly passed polygraph tests administered by the Inquirer. Yeah, that. And the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization.
Phenomena?
Phenomena?
Yeah, you said E, there's not an I or an E in there.
I said phenomena.
Phenomena.
Anyway.
It's in Italy.
It's me, Mario.
Amalia.
I put an A in front of his name.
Very Italy.
Travis, his older brother, and their mother were described by the Navajo County, Arizona sheriff as longtime students of UFO.
What does that
Like,
mean?
they just included it, like, to say, like, they were obsessed with, aliens and stuff,
They're fucking freaks.
basically.
So Travis is the one that was abducted. He
Yeah.
was already obsessed with aliens.
Yeah.
No, his mother and his
Well-
brother were. We don't know about Travis.
No, this is Travis.
Him and his brother.
Well, I misheard that.
It's
My bad.
Anyways,
I thought I was the one who didn't know what's going on most of the time.
Jeez.
some ufologists believe Walton was abducted by aliens. I guess there's a pretty... I've never heard of him because I'm not into that. But there's this guy, Jim Ledwith, and he believes him, obviously, and he said, for 5 days the authorities thought he had been murdered by his coworkers, and then he was returned.
Oh, he was missing for 5 days?
Yeah.
I thought it was like the same night.
No, it was 5 days.
Yo, what did his coworkers do when they went back to work? They're like, we never speak about that night again.
Right?
They probably said something like that.
Holy shit.
All of the coworkers who were there, who saw the spacecraft, they all took polygraph tests and they all passed, except for one, and that one was inconclusive.
Well, we never trusted that guy anyway.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter.
He was probably the driver.
Yeah, he was always shady. He's the one who drove away and felt guilty about it.
Skeptics consider the case to be a hoax, describing it as a sensationalizing on the part of the media and to makeup job.
What?
A fake
to make
job.
money, yeah, like
I
fake
don't-
up.
Yeah.
Fake up.
A fake story to make money?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I meant to say.
Let's just do the longer version of this.
Okay. UFO researcher Philip J. Klass believes Walton's story to be a hoax.
I heard Hulks.
Hoax.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
Hoax.
You kind of insert a lot of L's into these words. They're not legit.
I don't know where they come from.
I don't either.
Anyways, he believes that Walton did it for financial gain.
All he made was $5,000. Was it worth disappearing for 5 days?
You probably made more than
Oh.
that.
He discovered many discrepancies in the accounts of Walton and his coworkers. After investigating the case, Klass reported that the polygraph tests were poorly administered, that Walton used polygraph countermeasures, such as holding his breath, and that Klass uncovered an earlier failed test. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Anyways, Klass uncovered an earlier failed test administered by an examiner who concluded the case.
What the fuck's happening, bro?
Examiner.
Anyways, that first examiner concluded that the case involved gross deception.
It was disgusting.
Nicely done, Michelle.
Thank you.
Cognitive psychologist Susan Clancy argues that the alien abduction reports began only after stories of an extraterrestrial appeared in films and on TV, and that Walton was likely influenced by the NBC television movie, The UFO Incident, which aired 2 weeks before his own claimed abduction and dramatized the alien abduction claims of your story.
Really?
Barney.
I thought it sounded familiar.
Barney and Betty Hill.
Dang.
She also noted the rise in alien abduction claims following the movie and cites class conclusions that after viewing this movie, any person with little imagination could now become an instant celebrity.
I should
Kind
do
of
that
roasted
shit.
them in the...
Basically.
I know, that's kind of fucked up.
She also concluded that one of those instant celebrities was Travis Walton.
Dang. They said, fuck you, Travis.
I mean, he was already into the whole alien thing before, and then that movie came out, and he's like, I don't know, he's like, now's my chance. What if those coworkers are like fucking with him, and they just like pushed him off, and he's like, man, fuck those guys, and he's like,
Disappears for 5 days.
disappears for 5 days and makes up this crazy story.
Yeah, basically. Crazy. So in 1978, he wrote the book, The Walton Experience, detailing his claims, which became the basis for the 1993 film Fire in the Sky.
Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Probably.
It
Where
was
they show the
literally.
scene in the room, the
Yeah.
white room, and there's two people that walk in, two aliens.
I mean, I've never seen the movie, but
I
it's
was like, I don't know if
literally-
Brittany watched the movie.
it's literally like they
They reenacted it.
Paramount Pictures decided Walton's account was too fuzzy and too similar to other televised close encounters, so they ordered screenwriter Tracy Torme to write a flashier, more
Provocative.
thank you, abduction story. So
Dang, his
basically-
abduction wasn't enough.
Yeah, it was too basic.
Like, abduct him, but make it naked.
Basic.
Okay.
But yeah, basically the movie is like about what he wrote about in his book.
So how did they make it flashier, do you know?
There's Hollywood Zazz. Razzle Dazzle.
Fingers.
He was wearing like a sparkly jacket as they picked him up. Like,
Maybe that's where they came up with the probing.
Yo. There's probably in my story. Spoilers.
maybe that's where they came up with the probing part. I think that's the funniest thing.
So 30 years after the book's release, so in 2008, Travis Walton appeared on the Fox game show The Moment of Truth and was asked if he was, in fact, abducted by a UFO on November 5th, 1975, to which he replied yes.
I mean, you can't go back now.
Yeah,
You're
held
committed.
it for 30 years, you may as well.
The polygraph test determined he was lying.
Dang.
Dun, dun, dun.
And that was a lie, and that was a lie.
That's it for my story. I just had a little... He's now 67 years old.
Still alive, thriving.
Yeah, he has his own website.
So you think he's still making money off of it somehow? Like,
On his website.
yeah.
I think so, because he also sponsors his own UFO conference in Arizona called the Skyfire Summit.
Yeah. I was also thinking...
using that movie name in there.
Right? That's what I was saying.
I was also thinking, too, that for every interview he's doing, he's probably getting paid quite a bit,
True.
you know,
Yeah,
for the last 30 years. So he's
He's so relevant.
probably didn't have to work since then.
And he must be relevant if we're talking about him.
Yeah.
Basically.
He's looking back in those coworkers who just fucking left him like, man, fuck all y'all. I made my money.
Even if he was lying, does that mean he disappeared for 5 days?
Yeah.
That part's weird.
Wait, remind me, where was it again?
In Arizona.
Snowflake, Arizona. I don't think you could live in
wonder-
the wilderness in Arizona.
Yeah, I was like, isn't it mostly desert?
Well, he worked in like the forest.
Oh, so he
Here's
had
this-
some experience perhaps in like...
Possibly, but still.
Camping out for 5
They literally
days?
like had a whole search party.
I
For
don't
him.
know.
They had a search party
That's
for 5
fucking
days?
And you know, everyone says, like, this can't be true because it's so similar to this other alien case. And I'm like, well,
Oh,
yeah,
wouldn't
wouldn't it
it
be?
Well, yeah, it's like their MO, you know?
Yeah, it's not like this different aliens coming down every time. Like, let's
Yeah.
try things a little differently
No,
today.
they do it the same way. Interesting.
What do you think?
I believe him.
I kind of believe him because he was missing for 5 days.
Well,
that's the big
where
one.
Where else would you go? Like, you know?
He actually had an underground bunker stored for this moment.
Like,
Well,
that's dedication, but I don't know, I believe it.
After thinking about how there was like a search party out for him for 5 days and he was nowhere to be found, and I'm just imagining like in Arizona, like, I don't know, deserted sort of land, like, where the fuck's he gonna hide?
And now you're like forest, and I was like, they have trees in Arizona?
I know. That's what I was thinking.
I'm imagining like
Yeah.
cacti everywhere.
Yeah.
You
Interesting.
just hid under a cactus.
For 5 days and no one noticed.
The different thing about yours versus mine is supposedly like the UFO in mine, it's shaped almost like an egg. So you said yours is like a disc. I'm imagining like, you know, like a plate or how a flying saucer looks, like one of Michelle's tattoos. Mine looks like an egg. What shape was yours?
What if you looked at my tattoo and the UFO and it was shaped like an egg?
All of a sudden.
I have a UFO tattoo.
Like
This
a
is, the background of it is how I imagine the guy's forest that he was hiding in. Like,
Whoa,
yeah.
You literally...
Yeah.
That's... Yeah.
My tattoo is like a UFO and it looks like a forest scene or
No.
a desert scene underneath it. That sounds more huge than it is.
It's, yeah, if you look really close, you can see the guy hiding out.
Look, Travis.
Wait, was your shape like just a normal flying saucer, like a disc?
I'll get to it.
I feel like
Why was mine an
we
egg?
see... They probably saw the same, like... It's the same shape, but I think from different angles. It looks
True,
different.
like if you're seeing it from like up close, it could look like a fucking egg.
Okay,
because
he
it's,
was
like, taller.
He was really close to it.
Yeah.
Or
150
if
yards.
it's like further away, it just looks like a disc.
I could see that. Alright, I am going to be talking about the alien abduction of Barney and Betty Hill, aka the Hill abduction, aka the Zeta Reticuli incident.
I'm glad you saved that one for last.
Yep. So Barney and Betty Hill were a married couple in their late 30s, early 40s-ish, who were reportedly abducted by aliens. Did I say abducted? No, I don't think I did. I don't know.
Now you did.
Now I did. Barney was a postal service worker and Betty was a social worker. They were also members of the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Barney was a civil rights leader and held a seat on a local board of the United States Commission on Civil Rights, which Betty was also an advocate for. Barney was so active in his civil rights position that he was even invited to attend the inauguration of President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1963. So he was like a biggish deal in the area. They were an interracial couple in the 1960s. Barney was black and Betty was white. So it was pretty unusual for the time being.
Yeah, big deal at this time.
Also, I read on a couple sources, but not on Wikipedia, so I don't know if it's true. Wow, that sounded very trusting on Wikipedia when I just said that sentence.
Damn.
That Barney had been married before and had 2 kids and had been divorced before he met Betty. Because they were, I think they got married when they were like in their later 30s. Which back in the 60s was like elderly, basically, right?
Yeah.
For getting married.
I mean, it still is, right?
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
for sure.
But I feel like people back then, they'd get married when they're like 16, 18.
True.
14
True.
maybe.
Ew, God.
Depending on the state.
Depending how many pedophiles were around. So anyway, I almost said, sorry pedophiles listening. I was like, no, I'm not. The alleged abduction occurred on September 19th, 1961, while the couple was driving home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire from their weekend trip to Montreal. I don't know how fucking close Canada was. Canada.
Dang, they would go there every weekend?
No, they would not. It was...
I was...
Well, I didn't say further every weekend trip. That was a good sentence.
Yeah,
Why
Good
was
talk.
it? Yeah, okay. I don't know
Did
why.
you think I
thought
said
they-
like weekendly?
No, I'm just tripping.
So for their once in a lifetime weekend trip to Montreal, they had been married for 16 months, but due to their demanding jobs, they didn't get to spend too much time together. So they consider this like their little late honeymoon, their weekly late honeymoon, but in Montreal, as well as Montreal. Though they also went to Niagara Falls. It wasn't planned and was so impulsive and last minute that they only just took like the cash that was on them. I read something that was like $70 and I was like, I don't know if stuff was that cheap back then, but honestly, like it might have been. The last day of their trip, they stopped at a diner around 10 p.m. and they planned to be home around like 2 or 3 that morning. During the drive, Betty saw a bright point of light in the sky that... Wait, did I include the most important part of the story? On the trip with them in the car. I think I am going to mention
Do
it
they have
later.
a dog?
They had their wiener dog. Important. I'm probably going to mention this again, but I just...
Does he have a name?
That's all I could think about. I didn't write down his name.
Oh, wow.
I feel like a dick.
It was the most.
We need the wiener dog.
Call PETA right now.
They're on the phone.
Speed dial.
So during the drive, Betty saw a bright point of light in the sky that moved upwards. She described it as being like a falling star that was going up. An upping star. It was moving erratically and growing in size and brightness, so she asked Barney to pull over at a picnic area so they could get a better look at it and walk their dog. The wiener dog.
Yes.
As I mentioned.
Weenie.
Yes. So Betty used binoculars to look at the strange light and said it was an odd-shaped craft with multicolored lights and rows of windows, which she believed was a flying saucer. Barney looked as well and initially thought it was just a satellite or a plane when it suddenly turned and started flying towards them.
Oh, imagine.
He said, quote, "This object that was a plane was not a plane."
He realized real quick.
Hell no. And she was like really down for thinking it was a UFO because her sister, I guess, had seen a UFO like several years before. So she was like, oh, hell yeah.
I want to believe.
Yes. They got back into their car and started driving slowly down an isolated road while still observing the UFO getting closer. They saw the object fly above the cliff's edge of a mountain nearby and said it looked to be at least 1.5 times the length of the 40-foot long cliff and that it was rotating.
Whoa.
So I guess it was long.
Good sentence.
It was a long boy.
A long boy.
After watching the spacecraft flying around for a while, it suddenly quickly descended towards them, causing Barney to stop his car in the middle of the road. It silently hovered about 80 to 100 feet above their car, but in front of them, so it took up the entire view of their windshield. Barney said later it reminded him of huge pancake. So I don't know if it was flat or egg-like. I don't know, because they said it was, like, long earlier.
It depends how fluffy the pancake you're thinking of.
Big true. It's like one of those,
Japanese.
I was gonna say the Japanese ones. They're like several inches. While it was hovering, Barney took his pistol that he had in the car. It was the 60s. And he put it in his pocket and stepped out of the car. He used binoculars to get a closer look and claimed to see 8 to 11 humanoid figures looking back at him from the craft's window.
Oh, hell no.
He said they were wearing glossy black uniforms and black capes. Or caps, depending where you looked.
Really?
I'm assuming that one of these was a typo because I heard some saying caps, some saying capes. So I think just some people ignored the E. A little bit of both. Maybe let's pretend they have both. Caps and capes. Why not? They were bougie. So suddenly, and in unison, all but one of the figures moved towards the panel on the back side of the aircraft, while the remaining figure seemed to communicate to Barney, quote, "Stay where you are and keep looking."
What?
The craft started to lower itself to only 50 to 80 feet above them and at only 300 feet away. And he then saw bat-like wings start to come out of the UFO, and a long structure came out of the bottom, which I am assuming is like a walkway. I'm not for sure. Barney decided, fuck this, and ran back to the car, hysterically telling hysterically telling Betty, "They're gonna capture us." The saucer moved itself to be directly on top of their car, and Barney took off speeding down the highway while telling Betty to keep an eye out for the UFO. She rolled down her window to look up, and suddenly they could hear a series of beeping and buzzing noises. The car vibrated, and the couple felt a strange tingling sensation pass through their bodies. They described what happened next as an altered state of consciousness that left their minds dulled, until they heard a second series of the noises from before and were back to being fully conscious. During this time, they had traveled almost 35 miles, but only had vague memories of their drive, including making a sudden unplanned turn, encountering a roadblock, and seeing a fiery orb on the road.
What?
Oh, what?
Missing time, what?
Oh, yeah, true.
So upon arriving home at dawn the next morning, when they thought they were going to be home at 2 or 3, the Hills were feeling a little off for some reason they couldn't quite place. They felt that they should keep their luggage on the back porch rather than their main house for fear of radiation, and Barney had an urge to go to the bathroom and examine his genitals, though he didn't see anything different.
I was like, I thought that shit would have grown in it.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry.
They both took long showers to remove any possible contaminations. They were very worried about radiation for some reason.
That's fair.
As well as feeling weird mentally, there were some weird things they noticed about their belongings as well. Neither of their watches were working, and they would actually never work again. The leather strap on the binoculars were torn, but they had no recollection of tearing them, and the toes of Barney's best dress shoes were scraped. After sleeping for a few hours, Betty noticed she was no longer wearing the blue earrings that she had on the night before and wasn't able to find them anywhere. As well as this, the dress she was wearing the night before was torn at the hem, zipper, and lining, and she noticed a pinkish powder on it that had stained the dress in some parts. She hung it up outside to get the powder off, which worked. And she then nearly threw it away before she decided that she was actually going to keep it as, like, evidence. Maybe.
Just in case.
Yeah.
She did anything about it.
Sure. So they discussed their uneasy feelings that night, and they both drew the humanoid figures from what they could remember. I couldn't find these pictures, though.
I would love to see them.
I think that everything I found later was, like, an artist representation based on their original drawing, so they must have been really bad.
Yeah. They're like, this
They weren't artists, you
bad.
guys. They worked at the post office as a social worker.
They were just humans. Humanoids.
Artists aren't humans.
Artists are next level.
I'm like,
artists are next level.
They're gods.
They're elite.
And I'm like, they weren't artists. And you're like, they were humans, you guys, not artists.
They weren't perfect. They were just simple humanoids.
Okay. Okay. Side note, the dress has now been examined by 5 different labs for chemical analysis, and results reportedly say it is not an organic matter. It's like it's not natural.
Oh, so it could be something extraterrestrial?
I don't know if it's necessarily extraterrestrial. It could be like man-made or something. I don't fucking know about organic matters. I didn't look that much into the dress.
I think organic matters means it's like naturally occurring.
Yeah, so maybe it's man-made.
Okay. Or maybe it was
candy.
Maybe it was from aliens.
Extraterrestrial matter.
Yes, extra. I can't.
The results said. They also discovered that there were shiny circles on their car's trunk that weren't there before. They didn't look like anything that could have come from an accident or anything. And when they went near them with a compass as an experiment, it started to freak out and spin around quickly before going back to normal when they moved it just a few inches away.
Did they ever get, like, their car tested, like the rings on it?
9.
Okay.
No.
I know, I gotcha.
I'm planning on going to Germany in November, so I'm practicing my German.
I was like,
9.
9 times?
No.
They tested it 9 times?
They tested it 9 times. And it was extraterrestrial organic material. I shouldn't have said organic. That didn't make sense.
It didn't. It cross-canceled each other out.
Whoops. A couple days after arriving home, Betty called an Air Force base to report the encounter, but downplayed the incident because she didn't want to seem insane. She was called back the following day for a more in-depth interview, which was then forwarded to Project Blue Book. This was a U.S. Air Force's UFO research
Project Blue Book?
project. Yeah.
I know her.
She's not a person.
I know. But
She
no,
is not.
Project Blue Book is a 9 too. Do we trust them?
I didn't.
We don't.
We don't trust them, guys. Like, we don't trust Project Blue Book.
No.
Not long after, Betty went to the library and checked out a book about UFOs written by retired Marine Corps Major Donald E. Kehoe. Who, I don't know.
The way you emphasize
Ho? Kehoe? He was also the head of a civilian UFO research group called NICAP.
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 We trust NICAP.
Oh, okay. We trust NICAP, you guys. She decided to write a letter to him about their experience, sparing no details, and how she and Barney were considering going under hypnosis to remember more clearly. This letter was received and passed on to Walter N. Webb, a member of the research group and an astronomer. 10 days after the encounter, Betty had a series of extremely vivid, intense dreams that lasted for 5 nights in a row. They were so unlike any other dreams that she had before that she would think about them all day and began to keep notes of what happened in them. In one of the dreams, she was being forced into a forest at night by 2 men who were about 5'5", wearing matching blue uniforms. She could look behind her and see Barney walking as well, but when she called out to him, he seemed to either be in a trance or sleepwalking. The men weren't exactly men, though. They looked humanoid with black hair, dark eyes, and prominent noses, but they had bluish lips, and their skin was a gray color.
Oh, were they wearing black caps or black capes, perhaps?
No, they were in blue uniforms.
Oh,
Ignorant
my bad.
bitch.
We can't do black and blue combos.
No. The men walked them up a ramp into a spacecraft where she was separated from Barney. When she tried to argue with this, a man that she referred to as the leader told her it would be much longer if they were examined together. When she got into the room for examination, Betty met a new man who had a calm and pleasant manner, but who wasn't that good at communicating English with her. He told her they wanted to test her and her husband to know differences between them and the ship's occupants. The examiner cut off a lock of her hair, examined her eyes, ears, mouth, teeth, throat, and hands, took trimmings of her fingernails, and used a dull knife to scrape some of her skin off. Next, he thrust a needle into her belly button.
Aye.
Yep. This obviously fucking hurt Betty.
Yeah.
But all the leader had to do was just wave a hand in front of her face and all the pain went away.
Oh.
That's dope.
That's what I'm trying to get during tattoos.
Exactly.
The artist is just like, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Every time the needle hits you, just constantly waving back and forth. Betty was then left alone with the leader in the examination room, where she noticed a book with strange symbols on the front that the leader said she could take home. She asked the leader where he was from, and he showed her a map that was covered in stars. When being escorted off the ship, a disagreement broke out between some of the men before the leader came back and had to take the book away from her, telling her that the other men on board didn't even want her to remember the encounter at all, so she sure as fuck could not take this book with her.
Right. That would be evidence against them.
Yes. Her and Barney were taken back to their car where the leader said they should watch the craft leave. They proceeded to do this before continuing on their drive home. I thought that was a funny, odd flex for the leader to be like, yo, you guys should watch though. This looks like pretty cool.
Yeah. They're like, I want you to watch us leave.
Watch us. Look
It's
back
like-
at it.
It's like making sure when you... Yeah. Hate to see it go, but I love to watch it
Hell
leave.
yeah. Reminder that this was all a dream though, because even while I was reading it, I thought it was real.
Was it a
For a
dream
second.
though? Was it, or was
We'll
it a
find
repressed
out.
memory?
We'll find out.
Lucid dreaming.
Maybe. So she did tell Barney about these dreams, but he considered them nonsense and basically told her she was just stressing over nothing. He felt weird too, but I don't think he thought it was aliens.
He's trying to be like a manly man. He's like, nah, it's nothing.
Yeah. On October 21st, 1961, the man from earlier who read the letter, Walter Webb, struggled there, visited to interview the couple about their encounter. Over the course of 6 hours, they revealed to him everything they could remember from that night. And Barney talked of having a sort of mental block, like his memory was trying to keep him from thinking about things he didn't actually want to know. Webb took all of their information as truthful. They were interviewed again on November 25th, 1961, but this time by two different members of the Nightcap. Mm-hmm. Is it actually called Nightcap?
Yeah, Nightcap.
Oh, okay, of the Nightcap. C.D. Jackson and Robert Hammond. While recounting their story this time, the Hills mentioned how the usual 4-hour drive home took them about 7 hours despite them not stopping for any prolonged periods of time. Jackson and Hammond told them they believe this could have been because of the missing time phenomenon that occurs in some victims of alien abductions, where subjects to these incidents feel that no time has passed at all, but it's actually been a while, in this case, 2 to 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So this is basically implying that they were abducted for a few hours and had their memory wiped.
3 hours?
2 to 3 hours.
2 to 3 hours.
Yeah. The Hills both also mentioned seeing the fiery orb in the road, but put out the idea that maybe it had just been the moon, before being informed by the interviewers that the moon had set earlier that evening, several hours before they would have seen it.
Right, because it's really late, it's really late at night, almost. It's past 2 a.m. then, huh? They're supposed to be home at 2 a.m., so it's probably
probably midnight or something.
Okay.
It was agreed that the couple would be placed under hypnosis to try and trigger their memories of that night. Barney wasn't too keen on this idea, but agreed only to help out Betty. Mm-hmm. By February of the next year, 1962, the Hills often drove through the mountains where they may have been abducted in hopes of finding the location where they saw the fiery orb in the road and hopefully resurface their memories. They had no such luck, and it actually wasn't until 3 years later that they even found the spot that they had seen the orb. Yeah. No memories were recounted, though, during these trips. You guys ready for a fun paragraph filled with random names while they search for a hypnotist?
Yes.
All right. So the Hills were active in their Unitarian church and began to openly talk about their encounter with the congregation in March of 1963. This came a few months after they privately told a guest speaker, Captain Ben H. Sweat, of the Air Force, of their experiences and spoke to him about hypnosis, which he didn't feel qualified to help them with, but encouraged them to find someone. Sweat visited the church again in September of 1963 and gave a lecture on hypnosis. After the meeting, he spoke with the Hills. After hearing of Barney's psychiatrist, Mr. Stevens, who they liked, Sweat suggested they'd ask him about finding someone to hypnotize him. Barney spoke with Mr. Stevens, and he referred to them a Benjamin Simon in Boston.
So there's just a lot of talk.
Ooh, yeah.
Find a hypnotist.
They're like, find a hypnotist, not me.
But
Go to
maybe him,
this guy.
and then that person's like, okay, and
It was
get this guy.
It was like a fucking game of telephone, just trying to find a goddamn hypnotist. And it was 2 years before that other people in that group were like, yeah, you should definitely get hypnotized. And they were like, well, apparently there's no good hypnotist around here. So the Hills met with Simon on December 14th of 1963. Through their talks, he thought the Hills seemed very sincere in their thoughts that they had witnessed a UFO and strangely humanoid people on it, but he didn't actually believe that they'd run into aliens. He also thought that Barney was much more anxious about their experience than he wanted to admit, citing that he had an ulcer and high blood pressure after the alleged incident. Despite disagreeing with the UFO theory, he did say yes to hypnotizing them. So the first hypnosis session was on January 4th, 1964, and there were several more sessions throughout the next 5 months. He would hypnotize Barney and Betty separately, so that way they couldn't overhear one another's recollections, and after the sessions were done, he would reinduce the amnesia in them. I'll talk about Barney's sessions first, and then Betty's second. So, according to Barney's sessions, the strap to the binoculars broke while he was running back to the car, like I told you earlier, when he was like, fuck this shit. He drove them away once he got into the car, but felt a strong urge to get off the main road and head into the woods, where they saw 6 men standing on a dirt road. Men, I say loosely.
This is the part where they don't remember. They end up going into the woods.
Yeah, this is what they're trying to remember while under hypnosis.
It's terrifying to find out.
Mm-hmm. When they approached the men, the car stalled, and three of them went up to the car. They told Barney not to be afraid of them, and the leader, who I guess just fucking goes everywhere, told him to close his eyes. He spoke a lot about the eyes during his sessions, too. He said that they would stare into his eyes very often with a scary but mesmerizing effect. Some of the things he said about them during hypnosis include, "Oh, those eyes, they're there in my brain." Oh. And I was told to close my eyes because I saw 2 eyes coming close to mine and I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes.
Whoa.
So I don't know if the aliens are like fucking touching eyeballs with this guy.
No. Maybe it's like when they're staring at you, it's like giving you some intense feeling
like
in your
it's
face.
pressing onto your eyes.
You know, like you can, when you're sitting, you can feel someone staring at you, so you turn around and the person's looking at you. Imagine that, but like times 100.
Yeah.
Like the feeling of the eyes on you, but very intense.
And specifically on your eyes.
Yes, on your eyes.
So similar to Betty's dream, he spoke of them being taken onto the craft before being separated and taken into different exam rooms. His description of the exam is less detailed because he kept his eyes closed for the most part because he was freaked the fuck out. He had some of his skin scraped off, his eyes and ears were examined, someone felt his spine as though they were counting his vertebrae. He had a cup placed on his genitals and felt like they had gotten a sperm sample despite him not having an orgasm or anything. They also put a thin tube up his anus, but quickly removed it.
Like probing?
Yeah, probing.
Oof.
It was described as a thin tube or a cylinder, and I hope thin tube because cylinder sounds much more painful.
Sounds bigger. Like a bigger diameter.
It does. He said they spoke in a strange mumbled language to one another, but communicated with him in English via telepathy. So like their mouths weren't even moving.
Oh, so they're just speaking the words in his head.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
He described the leader as being gray and menacing, and said he reminded him of a German Nazi. He was a World War II vet. And he had probable PTSD.
Okay.
So it makes sense that could influence his perception of the guy. After the exams, he remembers being escorted back down to their car and watching the ship leave one a daze. While under hypnosis, Betty spoke of a similar incident to her dream, but with some differences. The humanoid men on board the ship looked different with wide slanted eyes, and the star map that she saw in the dream, she now referred to as more like a hologram. She did her best to draw a map of these stars for Simon, but just focusing on putting the stars that stood out in her memories. The map she drew had 12 stars connected by lines and 3 smaller stars that formed a triangle. Unlike Barney, she was excited to see the beings and even had like friendly banter with the leader. Meanwhile, Barney was just like, holy shit, you look like a Nazi, you're a fucking Hitler, like I want to leave. She also spoke of the beings rushing into her room excited, talking to one another about how Barney's teeth were able to be removed. Betty laughed at this because Barney had dentures.
No way.
He had dentures from an injury when he was in the army involving a grenade. So made all his teeth fall out.
It makes me wonder if they thought that was his real teeth. They're like, oh, this is so cool.
They're like, holy
so
shit.
easy.
We just put them right back in. After all the hypnosis sessions were complete, Simon was still in disbelief and instead chose to believe that they both had like this fantasy in their minds after hearing about Betty's original dreams. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Barney was now much more accepting to the idea that they had been abducted, but not quite to the level of acceptance that Betty had. She was like low-key hype as fuck.
Yeah, well also it sounded like you said her sister had said she was abducted before, so she already kind of was believing
she was a
before
believer.
they even saw them.
Yeah. The couple considered the sessions a success as now they no longer had anxiety about like those missing hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They then went back to their normal lives and openly talked about their experiences, but weren't like actively looking for attention for it. In 1966, a writer by the name of John G. Fuller was able to write a book called The Interrupted Journey about the Hills Abduction with their cooperation. The book contained the star map that Betty had drawn along with like all their accounts of basically everything that fucking went down.
Yeah.
It was very successful and went through several printings and did a great job publicizing the story. Kind of made them low-key famous.
Did it dramatize it?
I don't know. Not that I read. It seems like it was fairly accurate.
Yeah.
In 1968, Marjorie Fish, an elementary school teacher and amateur astronomer, read Interrupted Journey and was intrigued by the star map. She wanted to figure out which star system the UFO came from, and after several years decided the map was in the system of Zeta Reticuli, whatever it was I mentioned earlier.
She figured it out?
Yeah, it took her several years.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And this is a star system that is 39.3 light years away from Earth. Some UFO enthusiasts agree with her findings, but of course there are skeptics who are like, she just lined up random stars probably and you wasted years of your life trying to make them match.
Yeah, I can definitely see that people's hesitation.
Oh yes. So let's talk a little bit more about skeptics, shall we?
We shall.
Psychiatrists who didn't believe the UFO claims thought that maybe they had been stress-induced hallucinations brought on by being an interracial couple in the 1960s.
Oh.
But Betty refuted this and said that their relationship caused no issue with family or friends and was a happy one. It was also pointed out that the couple didn't undergo their hypnotic sessions until 2 years after their alleged abduction, which gave them plenty of time to practice and perfect a matching story. This doesn't sound right to me because, according to sources I read, their stories were not exactly the same. But trying to find it, I couldn't find out exactly what was said. I couldn't find transcripts. There was recordings, but I was writing about this like yesterday and today, and I was like, I don't want to listen to like an hour of recordings, and I don't even know when it's going to get interesting.
Yeah, it's from the 1960s, so it can already be hard to find those kind of documents.
Yeah, I started listening to some, but like the quality wasn't great, and I didn't know when it was going to start talking about it. Some people also thought that their stories could have been inspired by a description of aliens on a TV show that had been airing around that time. Kind of similar to yours, Brandy. It was like a TV show that was on a couple weeks before. Mm-hmm. It's also said that they could have been stressed, sleep-deprived, and thus uncovered false memories of being hypnotized. One UFO expert wrote that the hills were, quote, the poster child for not driving when sleep-deprived. Kind of rude.
Really? I don't know, that's very specific.
I know.
And to especially, like, what, they pulled over and just walked around for a few hours in the forest? Nah.
But I guess there was no one else there to confirm what time they got home or anything.
Okay.
It was just those two.
What did they gain out of it?
I don't know. I don't even think that they got money or anything. So, on February 25th, 1969, Barney Hill died of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 46.
Whoa. He got hemorrhaging? So that's in his brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, I don't want to say anything, but
I think
possibility of going on a UFO?
Well, like I said, he did have high blood pressure after everything happened. I read on one source that he had alcoholism, but that was only one thing, so I'm not going to really trust that. I also read on another one that Betty thought that maybe the stress of the incident, like...
Yeah.
Got to him.
Yeah, it got to him.
It?
Yeah, he died only 8 years after they even saw it. It's just really fucking sad.
He was young then.
He was really young. Betty went on to reportedly see other UFOs in her life and became like a celebrity in the UFO community, low-key. She died at the age of 85 on October 17, 2004, and she never remarried after Barney.
Aww.
The end.
Wow. So I'm going to be talking about the Lonnie Zamora incident. That is this day... That is, to this day, over 50 years later, has left even the biggest skeptics scratching their heads. On Friday, April 24th, 1964, at about 5:50 p.m., Officer Lonnie Zamora, kind of dope name, by the way.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a person. I thought that was like a star system like mine.
No, that's his name. It's a cool name. So he caught sight of a teenager speeding past him in his car, so he put on his sirens and followed after. It was a pretty boring day for him on duty, so he was actually pretty thrilled to be getting some excitement. Lonnie, 30 years old at the time, had been a police officer in the small town of Socorro, New Mexico for 5 years. The town had only about 6,000 residents, so Lonnie was well known in the community and respected by most people. Most people knew who he was, obviously. The population's so little. He followed the speeding car into the outskirts of town, which is pretty much just a desert area because it's New Mexico. And suddenly, during his pursuit, he hears a loud roaring sound coming from the west. It wasn't like a blaring sound, it was a roaring sound.
I was really hoping the story was going to be, he pulled over the car and there was an alien inside.
That'd be so awesome. He instantly thinks of the old dynamite shack located in that direction and becomes worried that it might have exploded.
What a small town fucking thing to say.
Also, I was thinking, what a 1960s thing to say.
True. Small town 1960s. Oh, fuck, the dynamite shack.
It might have exploded. So, of course, he turns his car onto a gravel road and heads west, letting the speeding driver go. He got away with it this time.
Nice.
After a couple of minutes of driving, he can see something in the distance. And it's not the dynamite shack. He does see that too, obviously, but he sees something a little more interesting.
It's still there.
It's still there. Yeah, it's not blown up. He sees a narrow, funnel-shaped, bluish-orange flame. In order to get closer to whatever it was he was seeing, Lonnie tries to drive his car up a really steep hill, and the first 2 times he fails. And 1960 cars, I don't know. But on the 3rd attempt, he gets to the top of the hill, and he has a better vantage point at the top, and he continues heading west in the direction of the object. Suddenly, something very shiny catches his eye. And it's not the dynamite shack.
egg.
It's a big, shiny egg. Pretty much. So about 200 yards away, he sees something that he first believes to be an overturned car, upright, pointed on its radiator or trunk, which obviously, if you think about that, it's like a picture of that doesn't make sense, but, you know, if you're not familiar with something and you look at it, you're just gonna associate it with something that you're familiar with. So he thought it was a car overturned, pretty much just like flipped like that.
Okay.
He also notices 2 people he describes as either kids or
Aliens.
or small adults.
Okay.
Which I kind of like that description, small adults, wearing white coveralls, which I think are overalls. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Like a jumpsuit.
Okay, they're wearing little white jumpsuits. He recalls one of the people noticing him and looking surprised, like they didn't expect anyone to be there.
They were like, oh shit.
He's on to us.
It's the fuzz.
The fuzz. The longer Lonnie looks, the more confused he becomes. What he once thought was a car, he soon realized is actually an oval-shaped object with no windows or doors and aluminum in color. There's a strange red symbol painted in the middle of the object that he's not familiar with. I'm not even going to try to describe it.
Okay.
We'll post a picture of how they thought the little
Or
egg
will
craft
we?
looked. Or will we? I'll remind Michelle. So, Lonnie, not sure what to make of this, gets back into his car and drives towards the object. As he drove, he radioed the dispatch that he would be out of his car checking on a crash in the gulch. As soon as he parked, I don't know what
The gulch?
Okay, so it said an REO, and I was like, what the fuck's an REO? And
You're like,
then-
oh, it's a gulch.
well, pretty much it was like a dried up creek bed.
Like a ditch. Or like a dried up creek bed.
Like a dried up creek bed.
You're
I don't
like,
know.
What's an REO? Oh, gulch? That's a much more normal word.
To me, I at least knew what a gulch was. I didn't know what an REO was.
Maybe
so
I know what a gulch is if I read it, but hearing the word gulch, I'm like,
Yeah, I'm
fuck's
like,
a
what?
gulch?
Alright, anyway, so he pretty much tells dispatch he's gonna be checking on the car in the crevice of the mountain.
Ew.
Of the hills.
It's like the vagina of the mountain.
Okay, gulch then, Michelle, gulch.
Thank you.
As soon as he parks, he hears a sudden roar coming from the object.
Rawr.
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 Just like before, and again sees the blue-orange flame coming out from the bottom. He immediately thinks that the roaring sound may indicate an explosion waiting to happen.
God, this guy in explosions. He's obsessed.
I think I read somewhere that he was a veteran.
He was an arsonist.
Oh, he was a veteran, so maybe he had some legitimate fears about
PTSD.
explosions. Yeah. So, hearing the roaring sound, he sprints back to his car, and while in the process, he knocks off his glasses he was wearing. He was actually, it's kind of funny to imagine, but he was wearing his prescription glasses, and being the cool guy Lonnie Zamora is, he had sunglasses over, so your boy was wearing double shades.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So he knocked off his glasses, both of them, I suppose.
So
he
all
couldn't-
2 pairs.
all two, not one, but 2. And he begins to hide behind his car. He notices that the object is propped on 4 slanted legs. It begins to rise vertically off the ground, and Lonnie is like, nope, and starts running the opposite direction. He might have been concerned it was going to come towards him.
Why didn't he drive away?
Well, he's on top of the hill. I don't know if that would have been difficult, but he was already outside of the car, so starting it up and then turning around would have been kind of difficult.
Just roll down the hill.
Yeah, so he just pretty much
Throw yourself.
just roll.
It's
And
faster than running.
Yeah, and Lonnie just rolls down the hill. So as he's running, the roaring sound suddenly stops. He looks back to see the object, which is now floating about 10 to 15 feet off the ground, flying horizontally in a near perfect straight line, which is very weird to think about. Like, you know, usually if you're flying something, there's like a bit of turbulence, but it's just perfectly gliding
Like a
across the
fluffy
lands.
Japanese pancake.
Exactly. Except it looked like an egg. It didn't make any more sounds, and there was no more smoke or flames coming out of the bottom anymore. So it was just completely silent as it moved horizontally across the hills. Like a what?
A Prius.
Like a Prius.
Those shits were quiet.
The OG Prius.
Mm-hmm. Lonnie?
Can I make a side note real quick?
Yeah.
And say, why do my next door neighbors I share a wall with seem to be playing like rave music in the middle of the day sometimes?
I hear it.
I'm saying it like low-key quietly. I'm sure you guys have noticed though that randomly they'll just be like, it's like 6:30 p.m. It's still sunning out.
Yeah, and they're bumping over there.
They are bumping.
Yeah. So if you guys hear any vibrations in the background, it's not a alien abduction, it's just the neighbors.
It's just me clapping my ass cheeks to this music.
Alright. Enough about the ass cheeks. Lonnie goes back into the car and radios to dispatch a second time. He tells the operator to look out the window for some strange balloon-shaped aircraft. Obviously, he's not really able to describe it past that point because he only kind of got a brief look at it. The operator actually sees nothing, and it wouldn't be until later that Lonnie would realize the operator's window pointed towards the north, so he wouldn't have seen anything unless he had went outside and looked towards the west. That was the direction it was traveling. He also requests that his colleague, Sergeant Chavez, be sent to the location. And I guess Sergeant Chavez was also one of his good friends.
Okay.
Chavez arrived in a couple of minutes, but the object had already vanished over the hills and out of view by that time. And Chavez was actually convinced that Lonnie wasn't making it up because he looked at Lonnie, and Lonnie looked super worried, really pale, and was sweating with adrenaline. So he had never really seen him like that, so obviously he was going to believe him. They walk over to where the landing site was and notice that the area is still smoldering and smoking. Same. Me. But it gets better. But it's cold to the touch. Me as well.
Okay.
There are
Edward Cullen.
Okay. Real talk. Damn, bro, they're bumping that music. It sounds like an earthquake.
I wonder if it's just, they just happen to watch like movies that
Is it
like
vibrating?
take place. They're just watching Skins UK.
Yeah.
That raves on it.
This is sponsored by a sound bar. So there are 4 small imprints about 3 to 4 inches deep and each one is about 12 feet apart from one another. These are no doubt the imprints left by the object's legs. So what exactly is the object? The unidentified flying object. UFO. So
Egg.
Pancake. So as it turns out, Socorro.
The fuck just happened?
I literally think I just had a stroke. So Socorro is about 25 miles from Holloman Air Force Base and their White Sands missile testing ground, which seems very ironic that that's just 25 miles away.
It's whatever.
So that seems pretty obvious that maybe it had something to do with an aircraft that went off course during testing. But it was soon realized that this was not the case. An Air Force commander from the Holloman base and an FBI agent arrive on the scene just a couple hours later and begin grilling Lonnie with questions. Lonnie eventually shows them a drawing he did of the symbol he had seen marked on the side of the craft and is immediately dismissed as not belonging to the Air Force. The commander checks back in with base and describes the craft that Lonnie had seen, and of course, they have nothing that fits the description. Do you guys have like an egg-shaped aircraft?
Yeah,
they're
we were
like,
gonna ask.
They're like, not really, like a shiny egg. Nope. They go take soil samples and examine the landing site more closely. Again, the same 4 indents in the soil are noticed, but they also point out 2 smaller indents, perhaps belonging to like a ladder or like a ramp, lower from the craft, and even small footprints. Yeah.
Lonnie had tiny feet.
No, it was the small adults or the little kids. I don't know.
Little alien babies.
The little humanoids. So at this point, everyone that is there is convinced that Lonnie is telling the truth. They go as far as describing him as, quote, sober, dependable, mature, and not known to engage in flights of fantasy.
Okay.
I love that. I love that quote. There's some
It's
good,
a fantasy.
yeah, there's some good quotes in here. 60s quotes, man. So recognizing the seriousness of the situation, they warn Lonnie not to tell others about the 2 people he'd seen. They know that the public would go crazy thinking they were aliens belonging to the UFO. Like, if everyone thought that Lonnie had reported seeing aliens, he would become a laughingstock. A UFO is one thing that can possibly be explained, but aliens are a whole nother story. So they're like, literally, don't tell people about the humans. You can say anything you want about the UFO, just don't say anything about the 2 people there. They're gonna think you're a nut job.
Bullied.
Yeah, and he did get bullied.
Oof.
I know. But the next day, during a radio interview, Lonnie ignores their advice and begins to talk about the 2 people he sees next to the craft.
Fucking Lonnie, guys.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And
he would.
it gets worse. After he calls them people, he then clarifies, quote, "I wouldn't say they were people. I just saw something in white coveralls."
Oh, no.
And just like that, the media frenzy had begun. The entire town, and actually, after a couple weeks, the entire country thinks Lonnie Zamora is delusional for seeing aliens. He pretty much became a laughingstock, like they had warned them. So at this point, you might be thinking that Lonnie did imagine the entire thing, but the more the case is investigated, the harder it becomes to not believe him. If Lonnie did in fact make up the entire thing, what would have motivated him to do so? He gained literally nothing out of it, and it actually caused his career to pretty much be ruined.
That's fucked up.
Like, how are you going to take a cop seriously if he said he saw aliens? He also had no history of delusions, drug abuse, or alcohol abuse. He was in good health and recalled having his last beer over a month ago. So it obviously, like, drugs or alcohol wasn't the issue. And as it turns out, an entire slew of other witnesses also saw the craft that day.
Oh.
So he had some people to back him up. 3 individuals called into the sheriff's station around the same time to report an egg-shaped craft with blue and orange flames coming out of it. One person called an Albuquerque TV station to report, quote, "an oval-shaped object flying low in altitude." One might call that an egg. A local gas station attendant recalled a family of 5 tourists stopping for gas and mentioning, quote, "your aircrafts sure fly low around here," and that the object had almost took the roof off their car.
Oh my god.
Imagine just seeing like a little floating egg, and he's like, "Damn." It almost, I guess it was that close, like,
Darn, your air clap. Oh my
Clap.
god. Why do I even talk today?
Your air clap.
yeah, you have to remember, though, that Lonnie said it was only flying like 10 to 15 feet off the ground, so that's super close.
These dumbest tourists were like, oh, weird little aircraft there.
Yeah, look at your window, son. There's an airplane. And so 2 hours after Lonnie's report, someone had also claimed that a white oval-shaped object landed on his property, just 3 miles outside of Socorro. He said he was so scared to approach the object, he actually just let it stay on his property overnight. Imagine.
The fuck?
But can you imagine? He's probably like, I have no idea what that is. You know, out of sight, out of mind. Shut the windows, and he's like, hopefully that's gone by the morning. And
oh my god.
in the morning, it was gone.
That's hilarious.
And you have to keep in mind, all of these witness reports I'm bringing up, they came forward before Lonnie's story even went public.
Oh, okay.
But obviously, after the news had broke, countless more witnesses came forward with stories. The Air Force ends up passing the case along to Project Blue Book. Sounds
Oh my god,
familiar?
we don't trust them, you guys.
We don't trust them. So, Project Blue Book had been a department started in 1952 to investigate unidentified flying objects, aka UFOs. In the 1960s, the project was pretty much gutted, being seen as a complete waste of money and resources. By the time the Lonnie Zamora incident occurred, only a team of 4 people remained working for the project.
Jeez.
Mm-hmm. Immediately, Blue Book's director of operations confirmed with multiple sources, which include the Pentagon, weather stations, which they might have thought it was a weather balloon, flight activity records, and even the White House, that the aircraft didn't belong to any of those sources.
Oh my gosh.
Feeling at a loss, he commissioned scientist Dr. J. Allen Hynek to continue investigating. Dr. Hynek describes Lonnie as, quote, this is another good quote, guys,
Okay.
an unimaginative old cop of an old Socorro family incapable of a hoax.
They're like making this guy sound boring as fuck, trying to tell him
they're like
truth.
roasting.
Boring and stupid.
Yeah.
Like, he ain't-
Yeah,
He didn't do shit.
they're like low-key roasting him in it. Oh, and also, quote, and pretty Sora being regarded as a romancer. At the same time, Dr. Hynek arrived in town, so did a man named Ray Stanford. Ray had been in Socorro, commissioned by NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on
them.
Aerial Phenomena. NICAP was a UFO research group that at the time was actually taken really seriously. Probably, I don't know if they exist anymore, but if they would, I don't think they'd be taken as seriously now in 2020. From the start, NICAP accused Project Blue Book of being used as an Air Force cover-up. Remember, Project Blue Book was created by the Air Force, so a cover-up definitely could be possible, and you could see my skepticism towards Project Blue Book. Just, I mean, While examining the landing site, Lonnie points out a broken rock to Dr. Hynek, the scientist commissioned by Project Blue Book. He thinks that maybe the broken rock might have some traces of metal scrapings they could identify. For some reason, Hynek ignores Lonnie's observation, but Ray Stanford, the one from NICAP, is intrigued. Ray thinks that the rock could be evidence used to prove the traces contain extraterrestrial materials. However, since he isn't actually an investigator for the team, but merely a bystander at the landing site, he isn't actually allowed to take the rock. And if he tried to take it, obviously, the Air Force would probably stop him. So, it wasn't until later that day when Lonnie and all the officials were in a press conference that Ray drives himself back to the site and takes the rock, and he kicks over a little bit of dirt so nobody will ever notice.
Oh my gosh.
And he drives away from Socorro, immediately skipping town.
Why not just take the rock?
Huh?
Why not take the rock?
He did.
Oh, they said he kicked... Okay, never mind.
He took the rock and then he kicked over the spot so they wouldn't notice any disturbances.
I thought you meant he kicked, like, sand over the rock. He's like, no one will find
Nobody
the rock
will
now.
get this. No. He took the rock and then he immediately left town and he calls the assistant director of NICAP and tells him about the rock. The assistant director connects him to a man that works for NASA who might be able to test the rock material traces. So the two men meet in D.C. and... So the man, Henry Frankel, takes some scrapings and tells him he will call him by next Wednesday with the test results. In the meantime, Ray's friends, Ray goes out to dinner with one of his friends who's in the military and points out to him that NASA is in fact a government agency and that if the test results showed anything unusual, they were most likely going to cover it up.
True.
He straight up just told him that, and then obviously Ray is kind of like, oh fuck, he didn't even realize. And also, I didn't even realize for some reason that NASA was a government agency. I don't know. I don't really know.
think they get their money.
Exactly. So when he gets a call from Dr. Frankel, he's relieved to say the least. He thought he was obviously never going to hear from Dr. Frankel again. He tells him that, quote, the metals embedded in the rock did not come from Earth.
Oh.
Super ominous. And that
They were extraterrestrial.
Yeah, he didn't say that, but one might assume. And then he says that he'll be sending the samples and the test results back to NICAP by the end of the week. Well, days go by, and then weeks go by, and Ray continuously calls Dr. Frankel to no avail. Finally, someone answers, and this person, obviously not Dr. Frankel, informs him that Dr. Frankel was taken off the project because his conclusions were false.
What?
Suspect as fuck, huh?
I was gonna say, someone answers and they're like,
He died.
Who's Dr. Frankel?
I was thinking when I was reading this, I was like, bro, did they kill him? Did they kill him? No, they didn't kill him.
They fired him.
They
Killing
fired
would have
him.
been too obvious.
Yeah. So, apparently his conclusions were false, and a new test was done, and the samples were identified as silica, which is a very, very common desert substance.
And it's in, like, every little bag of clothes you buy.
Yeah, it's in everything. So, to me, this feels like an obvious cover-up, but to play the devil's advocate, maybe Dr. Frankel really had just been reassigned because he misidentified the samples. I can't say for certain what happened, but as we know, government cover-ups have been long associated with UFOs and aliens, and
True.
a lot of other things.
Like we talked about in our conspiracy theory episode.
It was also suggested that maybe the object was a lunar surveyor whose prototype had been tested at White Sand Missile Range on the morning of April 24th. So that's the day of the incident. The logo for this prototype looked somewhat similar to the one Lonnie had drawn out, but that is just about it for similarities. It didn't look like a fucking egg. It didn't have 4 legs. It had
Flames going out the butt.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't shiny like aluminum. So the lunar surveyor looked nothing like it. Not shape, not color. It actually had 3 legs to stand on, all 4. So
Just like the UFO, it happened to exist.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, these lunar surveyors didn't even have that logo painted on the side of them. Rather, it's just the company logo, so literally that lead just dried up right away. And the daily range log noted its testing and further proved that it made it back to the base on time. It was also believed that perhaps students at the neighboring New Mexico Tech had pulled off an extremely well-done prank on Lonnie Zamora. Imagine. Best prank ever.
Actually.
Yeah, their senior prank. So, and also it's a tech school, so supposedly, like, these are, like, STEM majors. A majority of the students there thought that Lonnie had it out for them, constantly finding reasons to give them tickets or to pull them over. Like I mentioned in the beginning, he was literally pulling over a teenager for speeding. I guess that was, like, his thing. Like, he had it out for the teenagers. They made it seem.
He fucking hated teenagers.
Can you blame them?
I mean, no.
So maybe the prank would kind of be a way to scare him and get some sort of revenge. It could explain why Lonnie described the two people outside of the craft as small adults. Perhaps the teenager who sped by him and led him out into the desert did so to lead him to the prank.
I can see that.
Yeah. But when we think about how many resources, specifically money, how much money and time it would have taken to create the craft, it seems really doubtable. Like, to pull that off.
Together with the government to prank
Exactly.
this guy.
Super elaborate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Best prank ever.
And you also have to think, like, how could college students or, you know, just teenagers, maybe it was like high schoolers, how could they pull this off without ever being detected by the FBI and the military? Like, if they did pull it off, like, kudos to them. I don't know.
I mean,
I don't believe this theory very much.
If they did, and they saw that the military and shit was getting involved, at that point, you swear on your goddamn life you're never going to speak about
gonna
this
die
again.
with this secret. True. So this lead was followed, and several students and professors were actually interviewed, but it led to no further indication that it was a hoax. But you know, it could have been like Michelle said. Maybe they're like, we're gonna die with this secret.
Yeah, once that many people get involved, like, you never speak about it again.
Yeah. And to this day, nobody has ever taken credit for it in public or in private.
It's kind of surprising.
And then the last theory that was also suggested was that maybe the town's mayor had created the hoax to gain national attention and turned Socorro into a tourist hotspot. This was like a offhanded one. It didn't have really much evidence. People
Again,
just
he
thought
needed
of
a lot of money, though.
He needed a lot of money, and he needed a lot of people working with him to get it done. But this theory is quickly dismissed because after the incident, the landing spot remained just a spot in the desert. Not even a plaque, nothing.
Didn't become famous.
Nope. And Socorro remained just a small little town. It never became a tourist spot.
Yeah,
so
I've never heard of
it.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So what would have the mayor gained out of it? Nothing. So that one's obviously dismissed. And so here we are over 50 years later, still clueless about what actually happened and what Lonnie Zamora actually saw that day. We're probably never going to know the answers, but what do you guys think of it?
I think either... Oh, I do think it was a UFO, but I do like the idea of the college students fucking with him.
I know.
That one's kind of funny.
I'm kind of rooting for that one in a way.
I'm rooting for that, but I am leaning more towards 8. I don't know if he'd see aliens, though. I almost feel like that's an hallucination, because, like, he didn't describe them as, like, looking weird, right?
No,
Or that
yeah,
you read at least.
but he was kind of far away, though.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I don't know what aliens look like.
Yeah, remember though, I think I said he was like 100 yards or something, so he was kind of at a distance, and I don't think he had his glasses on at the time. Imagine.
And I'm just like, I personally don't think aliens wear white coveralls, so I don't think it was aliens.
Yeah, well, I don't think he got really a close-up look at them, but
What do you think, Brandy?
I believe it.
Aliens?
yeah, and also,
And all those other people said that they saw something, too.
yeah. Once I started hearing like the witnesses come forward and that they had come forward before Lonnie even, had dealt with it or came out in the news, I definitely started to believe it.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's the 1960s. They couldn't just stop and take a picture, really. But it's also sad, too, because after Lonnie had dealt with all of that, he said the next year he just wanted to forget about it, and, like, he wished he never went through it, because it made him a huge laughingstock, like, pretty much ruined his career. Nobody took him seriously, and even his obituary refers to him as, like, seeing aliens. No, it's seeing aliens. I don't know, his obituary, I was reading it, and it talks a lot about, like, his sighting and that he wishes he could just forget it. I'm like, that's fucking sad, dude.
It's depressing. You don't need to put someone's life regrets on their obituary.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, it made it so a lot of people didn't take him seriously, and it kind of ruined his life, and, yeah, so, I don't know, y'all should have given the guy a little bit of an easier time, but rest in peace, Lonnie. And rest in peace, Betty and Barney and the Hills? What?
Their last name was Hill.
Oh, I thought you meant the hills that Lonnie was driving on.
The hills are alive. Do you guys think
have eyes?
creepier than
Brandy,
mine?
ominous.
I forgot to ask you, what do you guys think about mine? Do you think it was aliens or stress hallucinations?
I think this was aliens for sure.
I think
For
it is
sure.
as well. Just like the clothes and stuff.
Yeah,
The
that's
rips in all
weird.
their clothes.
Well, I think the craziest part is when you think about them being hypnotized and then being in separate rooms. I mean, I guess they could have made up
It
a
was
story.
2 years later, but they were very similar stories.
Yeah, but if they were repressed memories and they got brought up during
True.
the sessions, I mean, they do that for people still now to bring back repressed memories years later, so what would make it any different?
True. So
Yeah.
3 out of 3, all of our stories are real, guys.
Yeah. I mean, you guys can tell us
yeah.
what you think, not because you guys are so responsive with us. You guys are
So responsive.
You guys are always
You guys are
emailing us and everything.
like
so
1,000 emails per person. You need to calm down. I don't even have time in the day. On that note, our email is talesfromypodcast
You sure?
at gmail.com. No, it's not right. That's it. Okay, you should start this out differently. Let me start the show over. So our Instagram is talesfromypodcast. Our email, talesfromypodcast at gmail.com. Our website, talesfromypodcast.com. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have any ideas for any episodes. Just tell us how much you love listening to us. Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.